And we are live. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 190. Pretty light agenda for today. Some Pectra, Devnet, and 7702 discussions, and then two quick shout outs or three quick shout outs, and that should be it. So I guess most important thing today's Pectra and DevNet 1. I guess first off, maybe Barnabas or Perry, do either of you want to give an update on like the spec and sort of infra side of DevNet 1, and then we can chat with different teams about their specific progress?
Yeah, I'll talk about Pectra and then Barnabas can do EOF or PRDAS. So Pectra, I can share the link to the spec. The decision last week was that we would basically do the same as DevNet 0, with the main change being EIP Sansan 02. There's a thread in the interop chat where we're collecting status as well as which branches to use. I think some CL devs have already posted their branches, and EL have mainly indicated that it's a work in progress. So there's nothing to really use right now. So that's the current status. We're just waiting on ready branches to start with.
Thank you. And yeah, so there was the 7702 change, and I think we had a couple PRs, mostly in the execution API and a few on the engine API. Anything else on the specs for the Pectra DevNet 1? And maybe, before we do EOF and PRDAS, I guess on the EL side, do any teams want to share specific updates about where they're at and how the work in progress is going? If not, I will call on you. Besu, I see a lot of Besu people on the screen.
I can give an update. So regarding 7702, we have like a first version implemented. We had some questions regarding the gas pricing of the operation, but I think it makes more sense to discuss this offline. But yeah, we have like a first version. That's some tests are missing, but otherwise, I think we are more or less good to go.
Got it. And 7702 was the last blocker, like the last thing you needed?
Yes, because the other stuff should be ready for Devnet 1.
Awesome. Thank you.
So Nethermind, we have draft PRs of all the changes needed for Pectra DevNet 1 in branches. Now we need a little bit more time to review them, merge them together, and write some unit tests. Yeah, but that's it.
Got it.
I have more of a question.
Yes.
If you don't, So my question is, the EOF testing, I mean, DevNet 1 is going to be separate from the DevNet 1 for Pectra, right?
Yes.
That's okay. Got it. Thank you.
As in what? The idea is that we're going to be having EOF on top of Prague. So we would need to most likely have to rebase on Prague, on top of Prague. That's what we agreed on yesterday on the EOF call.
Yes, so we have so we have EOF spec on top of Prague. And that feels like the right thing because there's no world in which we do EOF before Prague.
The only issue that can be is that you will have a harder time debugging EOF bugs if there's still some Prague bugs. present. So
yeah, and I guess I don't know. It's even if that's true, it still feels like the right approach in a way because like we want teams working on the core of Pectra, yeah, and fixing those bugs. So it seems more reasonable than like basing it on top of the previous fork and then having to potentially like rebase it on Prague really late in the process and then also finding all those bugs. But this is, yeah, I don't know if someone has a strong opinion against this. Okay, and we can go back to the EOF DevNet discussions a bit after, but I'd be curious to hear from other teams just on the like Pectra DevNet one, yeah, how things are going. Andrew?
Right. So about DevNet 1, we have a draft implementation of 7702, but I haven't reviewed it yet, so I'm not sure like how far it is from a mergeable version. I don't think we have tackled the changes to the engine API, but I don't know. I haven't looked at them. Hopefully, they are not that major. And I have a question about an update to 7251 because it seems that like the increase the max effective balance because previously it was a purely CL change. Now it has an EL component, so we haven't implemented that yet. But I'd like to just double check that. Means that for DevNet 1, we effectively have 7251 on the EL side, right?
Yes, that's correct. So is it PR? You're talking about the one I just posted in the chat, the EL consolidations?
Yeah.
Yes, so yeah, we agreed to include that in DevNet 1.
Okay, so yeah, we have to implement that as well.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Anyone from Reth or Geth? Or Ethereum JS?
Yeah,
from from Red side, we started implementing 7702. It's only missing AIP, and it should be like finished like week or something like that. Yes, basically before the next ACD.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Ethereum JS also has the similar object. We are working on 7702, and maybe in a week or so, we'll also be ready with it.
Sweet. Anyone from Geth? Okay. No one from Geth, it seems. Okay, so clearly, yeah, there's still some work to do on the EL side here. We can check in on the next call. The one thing, I guess this is a bit out of scope. Oh, Marius is here.
Yes, there's no one else from Red speaking, from Geth speaking. So okay, I can do it. We're still missing 7702, I think, and yeah, we should implement this week and be ready for DevNet 1 soonish.
Awesome. And I guess, okay, on the 7702 front, I think, yeah, we should leave the spec as is for DevNet 1, but if we look in the future for DevNet 2, we still didn't quite find like a revocation mechanism we were super happy with. I guess, yeah, has anyone looked into this? Are there Yeah, are there updates just on the spec side for 7702?
I've got an update that I wanted to share, but first I've been offline for the last couple of weeks. I wanted to hear if there were any updates not related to this new revocation idea that I opened a draft PR for yesterday. Maybe if Aragon has something that they found during the last couple of weeks looking into the revocation mechanisms.
Is Sudeep on the call?
Yeah, there was a comment from Frangio in the Ethereum Magicians, which discussed about account-based revocations, and yeah, I think that's the best solution that I can put forward right now.
Well,
So maybe Lifeline can look at that later on.
what was the idea of the account-based
Uh, it,
revocation?
it was basically keeping track of the template addresses that you revoked in either a system contract or the EOA's storage itself. And when a 772 transaction arrives, the execution layer will basically check if the template address is already revoked, and if it is, then it fails.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I responded to this on ETH Magicians, and as I said, like this, we can implement this as an ERC. I really see no reason to implement this in the protocol.
I think there was another idea with max nonce, but I'm not sure about what's the current thinking about that.
If it's the same mechanism with max nonce that we had previously approved in 3074, I think it works okay, but I didn't get the impression that most clients like the idea of having some way of bumping the nonce in larger increments than just one. So that wasn't a super nice aspect of it. I don't know, maybe it's worth me just mentioning this other revocation idea that
Yeah,
we've
please.
come up with. Because I do think it's a little bit similar to what Sudeep is asking for. The proposal by Frangio on ETH Magicians was basically trying to address the fact that it's not as easy to see what types of authorizations you have in the air at any given moment. And it's difficult to know like what has been revoked and what's not been revoked. There's design patterns that avoid these types of scenarios, but the reality is that maybe we won't know how wallets are going to use this. And to have a more defensive mechanism, an idea, I think Vitalik mentioned it on the last call, or maybe it was in a breakout room, but instead of having the authorizations be these temporary things that must be included with a transaction to set the code in the account, we can instead save the authorizations so that in the account, you can actually look to see what code the account is delegated to at any given moment. And this definitely changes how we think about 7702 and 3074 because now, we're not providing signatures every time. Once you've authorized the delegation is there. And if you want to revoke the delegation, you could send another authorization to change the code to something else, even the zero address maybe. So it is changing how we think about the authorizations in a lot of ways, but ultimately it feels very similar. It feels like it provides the same functionality while also avoiding these issues of having the outstanding auths that users and wallets might not remember. And it feels like it resolves this discussion that has been ongoing for a long time about how to do revocation because the auths are no longer required every time you use the account. They are just single use authorizations now. once you delegate to an address of code with an authorization, your nonce is bumped, that invalidates that authorization is no longer valid. So that's kind of the idea. It feels pretty good to me in general so far. If anyone has concerns, would love to hear them. The one thing that has come up in my mind is it's starting to look like a protocol level proxy. And if we do that, we need to be very cognizant that this doesn't become a way which smart contract developers use for applications. So I could imagine if this was like a really cheap type of thing to do, it might be better for, say, Uniswap to deploy pool contracts using this like EOA proxy method. And I think that is something to avoid. But in general, it doesn't feel like there's many other major concerns with this approach.
Eric?
Hi. Yeah, so obviously just getting into this because it's a new suggestion, but I voiced some concerns in the Mafia chat. I think that this actually doesn't provide the same capabilities as before. So I think it actually does limit the usage in a pretty meaningful way, which is instead of having a recommendation of generally using sort of like a single smart contract, or even just to use something that looks like a 4337 contract, here we're basically saying you can only do one thing. You can only use one contract at any given time. You're committed to that contract. And that's a big change because both 3074 and 7702, all of the versions until now, basically allowed you to have a design space of how you leverage this capability. This is a new design space. It hasn't been resolved. What's the right way to use this? And this literally puts the limitation and says there's only one way, and it has to be a single account that's connected to a single account forever. Kind of not forever, because you can change to another single account. I think it's a pretty big change.
Can you go into maybe a bit more detail into like what's a use case that would have been possible before that's not anywhere?
Yeah, so I thought about an example again. Like it's a very preliminary example, and I think it's worth differentiating between use case and capability. There's definitely less capability here. We'll over time understand what are the use cases, right?
Yes.
But I think just a simple idea of a use case could be I might have an account that I have for very long-term things like key backup. Right now, EOA has like the backup problem. What if I have some long-term account that's very optimized for security that helps me avoid not having access to a keys or handling will and inheritance and things like that. And on the other side, I would have like more short-term account that is, for example, delegated access to a private key that is less permissioned in my account, or batching or gasless operations or things like that that are more day-to-day. I could do that with the previous version. I cannot do this with this new version. I'm not saying it's a great idea, maybe not.
That's
but
not correct.
Yeah, why can't you do this anymore?
That's just not correct.
Unless if I understood it correctly, once I have one 7702 delegation active, I cannot do other 7702s at the same time that use different code.
You're over-indexing on a very specific design pattern that was coming about from 3074, from the last design of 7702. What you can do is you can delegate to a smart account that has a plugin system that allows you to add other plugins that do exactly what you're saying.
But
the functionality is retained. It's just in a different mechanism, a mechanism that's actually much more forward compatible with the future of having everyone using smart accounts.
I agree that there's other ways of implementing this, but it's a different thing. You're basically saying you can design a different
system. It's a different thing, but the ultimate functionality is the same. What you're saying is the functionality is different, and it's not.
Well, the functionality.
The way that we get to the functionality is different, but the end result for the user is identical.
Not exactly, because if the user installs a malicious plugin, for some reason your plugin system is not perfect, then in this situation, that malicious plugin will have access to much higher permission actions or like to a different
Every
kind of contract that
7702
doesn't
message
have
you
to
sign
resolve.
has root access to the account. If you sign a delegation to a hot wallet that is insecure for some reason, even though you had an ultra super secure backup recovery mechanism, that hot wallet 7702 invoker thing that you signed to has root control of the account, could steal all your funds. So it's
No,
not a reasonable argument.
I agree to that. But again, you're saying basically that that system that has two wallets is not a valid design by anybody ever. I'm not sure that's a statement I would
But
agree with. Like,
I don't think that's
maybe that's
the
a better
argument though.
system.
The argument is, can we find something that we're comfortable shipping the L1 that introduces a lot of value to users, and has, minimal kind of side effects in terms of the design restrictions. So obviously there's like a trade-off where like the most permissive thing you could ever do will have the most security risks. And like I think we've heard from many client developers that they're uncomfortable if say there's just no revocation, or optional revocation doesn't get used a lot. So it's not about like, can you enable every possible use case, but like, can we find some set of use cases that are valuable for users, that we think leave the protocol, secure, or at least that the trade-off we're making in terms of the risks we add, are like sound. And yeah, it is very possible that like at least the first version can't accommodate every possible use case, but it's like, is that still a net improvement on today? And I will highlight, like Marius has this comment saying we can always ship nothing, but like we should sort of see this as the status quo in a way, where people have been asking for something like 3074 or similar for like many, many years. And the status quo for the past 5-6 years is we've shipped nothing because we haven't found anything that satisfies the sort of constraints around security and like expressibility. So yeah, just want to say like, that's the angle through which I would look at. Like I wouldn't compare against like the perfect alternative, but against we ship nothing. And is this something that gets us closer to shipping something that's valuable to a large set of users?
So I think just my point of view on this is I think the current version is better than the new suggested version. Definitely not saying we shouldn't ship anything. Definitely should have revocation in the protocol. We were proponents for that from when it was introduced. But I think the new version is just not an improvement on the previous one. I think the existing version actually, that the one that has been merged in the last one, we think it's just better.
But I think the concern there
It's
is
just not better. Like you should come up with something that's possible in the old version that's not possible in the new version, because the new version actually provides more value in the 2 points that I mentioned about resolving the outstanding auths that we don't know about because it's recorded on chain, and resolves the revocation debate that we haven't resolved still. Those aren't fixed in the current version of 7702 or in 3074. So the old version is not an acceptable solution yet. And this one is something that is potentially acceptable.
I think
everything that's possible in the old 7702 and 3074 is possible in the new 7702. I want to be very clear about that.
I see Frangio has his hand up.
Yeah, so I was just looking at this proposal, haven't seen it before. Can you comment, Matt, on how this interacts with cross-chain replayability? It sounds like because the nonce is incremented, unless you broadcast and actually publish the auth to all the chains you want at the same time, you would have to regenerate the auth later if you want to submit it to a new chain. Is that right?
The auth should allow for being, having malleable chain ID. If you use chain ID 0, it should be replayable on other chains. If you do not and you use a specific chain ID, then it's only valid on that chain.
But by being tied to the nonce, it seems to be tied to one chain anyway. Am I getting that correctly?
If you have a new account with nonce 0 everywhere, then there's no problem. But yeah, if you have already utilized your account on other chains and the nonce is different, then you would have to individually sign messages.
Right. So I feel like this is one place where it diverges from the current spec. And you have some patterns that are definitely not doable. In particular, maybe when you combine using as AA and EOA at the same time, which a lot of people have raised, and I don't think there's like a clear understanding whether that's a clear consensus on whether we think that's what's going to happen.
Arik?
Yeah, just as a thought, why not have the new version where that's how we handle long-term withstanding delegation, but still at the same time allow 7702 calls that have a signature in them execute the code they sign. So you still have the way to do like the ad hoc quick thing that like the specific delegation in a separate process without changing your long-term delegation, but then you have a long-term delegation active. Maybe that's the solution that gives us both options.
I guess the one immediate thing I can see is just you're effectively creating two features that do pretty much the same thing. Yeah. Richard has a question around like how this impacts some opcodes and whether it was whether it makes things more complex. I don't know, like, Klein, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely more complex. All opcodes that interact with the account's code in some way would need to be modified. We're basically creating a kind of a pointer in the protocol to say if I loaded some code and it was of this pointer type, then actually you need to follow the pointer to continue loading the code. And this is going to be more complicated. We're making things more complicated as we go, but I think it's not too horrible, and we need to resolve the questions around revocation and around perpetually valid authorizations. And this feels like a good path to doing so.
I guess, okay, Ansgar. Oh, sorry, let's do Richard.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up. I was not on the same question. I wanted to have another comment in general, but yeah, if there is a comment on this topic of complexity first, I would first handle this. But if not, for me, it was the general. First of all, I do like the new proposal, but I'm biased here primarily because for me, this proposal is closer towards, also as Matt said it, said on the way towards this upgradability real AA pass. But in general, I'm fine with two versions, but I like this proposal. The downside of this proposal is, for me, is what was mentioned earlier in the chat, that you cannot basically just deprecate it again, right? Like, because there potentially the current version of 7702 is very, very nice since it has no on-chain impact. You can just deprecate it a lot easier, at least. In general, I still think for me the worst outcome would be to have both at the same time, the current version and the proposed version, because this feels like we're going into a scope creep, and then we have to have. While we have the advantages of both, we also get the worst of both. So I'm not sure if this is really the preferred outcome. And I would rather say either we say, hey, revocation is how it is, and we don't go with expensive schemes or complex schemes where you can bump nonsense than it is how it currently is. It's optional and people can opt out, which is the current version. And I think there are quite some advocates for this. Also happy with that. Or we say we go with the other one where we say, hey, okay, we limit it where you can get the certain functionality only if you bake it into the account that you delegate to, but then you have a strong replay protection because there can always only, basically you have upgradable accounts and protocol for EOAs. But I think having both feels very dangerous, also when it comes to specifying it. And here, generally, I agree with Matt that I think the new proposal solves a lot of questions with maybe some drawbacks, but it solves this biggest question right now around this revocability, or like with, yeah. And if that is the biggest question, and if I think also here it would be interesting to hear also the Aragon team. I know it's short term, so maybe not in this call, but what they think about this, because they were the most vocal ones around the revocation, at least. So they're probably not the only ones.
Yeah,
Yeah, I need to look more into it, but on the surface of it, the new proposal looks good.
so I guess, yeah.
And I agree that we should like we shouldn't like make 7702 super generic and have like different various different flavors all available at once. That will be horrible.
So I guess, yeah, it does feel like people need time to review this, more thoroughly. And to be fair, the PR has only been out for 17 hours right now, so it's not like people have had a ton of time to do it. Do we feel like it's worth scheduling a separate breakout on this, or do we want to just review it async and discuss it on the next Alcor Dev? Yeah, it would be nice if by the next call we had something that people were generally happy with, and that we could use, whatever new version, whether it's this one or a tweak of it as part of Devnet 2 or something like that. Daniel?
Yeah, just to clarify something. I mean, it comes a bit what you said right now about Devnet 2. For Devnet 1, would we then implement the current version?
Yes.
Because but the proposals are quite different, so we might implement something that afterwards we have to throw away after a few. Not everything, but part of it of the code we have to throw away after a few weeks because 7702 is changing again. So I don't know how much sense it makes if we are very sure that we will change it to continue working on the current spec.
I guess my understanding from like what teams previously shared is it's like probably less than a week of work to finish 7702 for most EL teams. If that's the case, it feels like that's still the quickest path forward. But the other approach is we just remove 7702 from the next DevNet altogether. The one thing I would want to avoid is blocking the launch of 7702 based on like this draft PR. So I know that, last time it felt like there was still some value in having the old spec in the PR, even though we knew it would change. But I don't know if we thought it would change less than it's currently changing. But I don't know.
Yeah, at least my impression the last time was that there were discussions around the nonce handling and the revocation, but nothing else, which seemed rather small.
Yeah.
But the current spec is a completely different approach to how we do the account abstraction in this case. So I would say it's very, very different.
Yeah. Do teams feel like it is generally? If we feel like it's, I think the alternatives is we just do the DevNet without 7702. The people feel like that's a better path forward.
On this one, personally, as more on the wallet side dev, for us it's super helpful to, even with the current version, not with the updated version, to play around with it and get a feeling for it. While we can obviously try to set up local testnets, but if it's nowhere implemented, then it will be also harder to get up the local testnets, right? Like, so this is where possible. And I mean, I know the OTIM team doing an awesome job. They're pushing stuff for this, even for 3074. Having something like this would be super helpful, and they're having it as part of the DevNet would make this a lot easier.
I don't know. Any other EL teams feel like we should either keep it in or take it out? If there's no other strong objections, I think I would just default to leaving it in because, yeah, there is value in having it, and like, there's also some risk of issues when we take stuff out of DevNets, as we've seen time and time again. So I would keep the DevNet spec as is. And obviously, when we test DevNet 1, like, it's probably not the most valuable use of our time to test all the different parts of 7702, but like, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to delay us a ton. So okay, so let's keep it as it is. I'll post after this call in the Discord to schedule another 7702 breakout before the next ACDE. I'll look at all the dates that don't have a 14 UTC call in them already. But yeah, let's try and have another 7702 breakout by the next ACDC, and hopefully by then we have a final spec that we're happy with. Anything else on the topic? Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, I think this is good progress. This was kind of a long detour, but we were going to talk about EOF and PureDAS DevNets. But before we go there, anything else on just Pectra DevNet 1 stuff aside from EOF and PureDAS?
Do we have a rough target date?
So it seems like there's at least a couple EL teams that should be ready within the next week. So it would be kind of neat if, even if it's not all the teams, if we could get DevNet 1 stood up with a subset of clients before ACDC, that'd be really cool. My sense is we can get at least a couple ELs. And on the CL side, it seems like things are ready as well. So let's try to get a partial DevNet 1 set up by ACDC, and yeah, see how we do on that front. Anything else on Pectra DevNet 1? Okay, EOF. Barnabas, you started talking about the EOF DevNets about half an hour ago. Do you want to give us a status update there?
Yes, we had a EOF call yesterday, and we have agreed that we're going to be testing EOF after Pectra, so after Prague, which means that each client team will have to rebase their EOF code over their Prague code. And we have the Ethereum package already updated with EOF, so client teams should be able to test on that already.
Awesome, thanks. Any team updates on EOF?
Yeah, I know that Nethermind implementation is kind of ready, but we are still failing some tests, so it's not ready. We are working on it.
Thanks.
At Erigon, we are passing all the validation tests, and it's just a suggestion. It would be nice to have actual blocks so we can execute them and test it as well. Yeah. Thanks.
So when you say actual blocks, you mean just like some blocks creating EOF contracts and like calling various opcodes and stuff like that?
Yes. It would be nice to actually test the behavior of the software if we had an actual blocks with the transactions in them. I mean, EOF transactions with them. Yep. Oh, yeah, one more thing is that we are not fully ready yet, since some instructions are not implemented yet, but validation tests, validation steps are already done. I mean, so far the latest execution spec tests are passing. Yep.
Nice.
Thank you.
And then there's an update from Reth in the chat saying they're passing state and validation tests. Work has begun integrating EOF into Foundry. Anyone from the Besu or Get side?
I pasted the readiness matrix in the chat. that shows the implementation status. Besu has them all implemented. I'll let Get speak for them, but the readiness matrix, we should, when you have your updates, please update this spec file.
Cool. Yeah, any Get updates?
Sure. We are passing all except for one test from the stack validation. And I'm currently trying to make the state tests work, but they are based on Prague, so I need to revise first to get everything to Prague and make the actual functionality work.
Got it, thanks. So I guess next steps, obviously getting the rebates done, finishing these implementations, and if someone has the bandwidth, maybe adding some full block tests. Yeah, does that seem reasonable? No objection. Anything else on EOF people wanted to discuss?
EOF's going to move to, the implementer call is going to move to bi-weekly. We'll have a meeting next week, and then we'll move to weeks off of ACD. Okay. We went to weekly when we had a lot of spec updates, but now that spec updates has gone to basically none now, it's mostly a testing and implementation call, so we can do a lot of that async.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good sign. Sweet. Anything else on EOF? And then, yeah, I know we might not have everyone to discuss this here, but any updates on the PeerDAS DevNets? Or implementation, I guess. I doubt we're at DevNets yet.
Devnet 1 will be based on Alpha 3 as well. So each client team suggested that that would be the easiest to do.
Cool.
So the ENR change would need to be applied. I'm not sure if any CL people are here, but the idea would be to be up and running also within the next week or two, maybe, with PeerDAS Devnet 1.
Awesome. Any other comments, thoughts on the PeerDAS work? Okay. Anything else on Pectra at all? Nice. Well, okay, great then. It seems like things are moving along. Just 3 quick updates then. First off, we discussed in the past a couple times wanting to have a formal place for people to leave like high quality reviews on EIPs. After some back and forth, it seems like something that's hard to standardize. You know, some EIPs will get audits, some EIPs will get a really good comment on the PR, some EIPs will get a great comment on ETH Magicians. And so an idea that we came up with to address this and track it is that when EIPs have their discussion threads in ETH Magicians, we can basically make it the job of the EIP author to keep track of all these reviews alongside with, you know, updates to their EIPs and potentially open issues or questions that still need to be resolved. So I posted this draft in the chat, but the idea is that when you open an ETH Magicians thread, you know, for an EIP, you would get this as like a default template to fill out. We obviously can't force people to use it, but it's kind of a nudge towards doing that. And because client teams are the ones who end up reviewing these EIPs and making decisions for them, if anyone has feedback on like stuff that should be in this template or stuff that should be framed differently, either we can discuss this quickly here if someone has something they want to share, but otherwise I would just move the conversation to ETH Magicians. But yeah, that should hopefully give us like an easy way to keep track of like, these are, you know, if like Solidity leaves some significant comments on an EIP and they don't want to show up every 2 weeks to say them over and over, then it should be basically tracked in the first post of the ETH Magicians thread on the EAP. Yeah. Any thoughts, comments? If not, okay, Next announcement, Perry, the ETH clients repo.
Yeah, so to introduce the organization to EL devs, there's this GitHub org. It's called ETH Clients, and it contains the, at least from the CL view, the canonical configs for Sepolia, Holsky, as well as mainnet. It also contains all the checkpoint sync endpoints and potentially, I think Jacek was mentioning, potentially in the future also sources to get error files and stuff like that. The idea is that there's at least one admin from each client team. So it's a joint resource that's maintained by every single client team, and we can use that however we see fit. Right now, there's just admins from CL teams, and almost every CL team is represented there. So we wanted to start adding the EL teams in there as well, so that we round out all the client team admins there. So there's a thread on all core devs. I can just share the link to the thread. If someone from each team mentions who they want me to add, then I can just validate that and go ahead and add them. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, yeah. Any questions, comments? Okay. And Light Client has an unrelated question, but we have some time. So what's the latest on dropping pre-merge history for Pectra? Any updates there? I don't think we've discussed it here, so okay, last call if anyone has updates. Okay, so no updates on that. And then, okay, last thing, I asked in the Discord if people wanted to have an ACDE on July 4th. Everybody wanted to. No one said they would be celebrating and missing this. I'll be out, but Alex Stokes will be there running the next ACDE. So we'll have it at the same time 2 weeks from now. Anything else that we want to discuss before we wrap up? Okay, if not, well, thanks everyone. I'll post a recap on the R&D Discord, and yeah, talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.